What if the night your life finally began sounded like a giant knocking through a storm? Hey friends, we got to chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone pretty fast. In our book club, we're reading the Harry Potter books together with a bunch of serious fans. And that pushed me to come here and talk about things people maybe don't pay enough attention to. I retell the story a little, and I also point out the details and smaller layers inside each chapter. If you still haven't read the book, or even if you read it before and want to do a real reread, what better chance is there than doing it next to a bunch of Potterheads? The Telegram group link is in the description, so join us there. And let me warn you right away, because I'm looking at the whole story and the bigger chain of events, there will be some spoilers too. So let's get into Chapter 4, The Keeper of Keys. Chapter 4 happens exactly where Chapter 3 ended. We don't have a time jump and we don't even have a location jump, unlike Chapters 1, 2, and 3, where that kind of shift happened. We had a cliffhanger. Harry was sitting there waiting for his birthday to arrive. Like every year, nobody remembered it was even the night of his birthday, and nobody cared. Then, suddenly, there's a sound at the door. A massive hit lands on the hut door, and it opens. And now we're facing a character with an enormous presence and body. A half-giant, huge, massive, but kind. That's another contrast right there. And if we want to get a little more precise, I think this is one more place where Rowling wants to show the contrast between a character's appearance and what they really are inside, so we don't judge them too quickly by how they look. If we saw Hagrid somewhere with no context, we probably wouldn't be dying to sit down and talk to him. We probably wouldn't be rushing to become friends with him. But everybody who's read the books or watched the films knows that one of the most lovable and unforgettable characters in the whole franchise is Hagrid, even though he really does have an intimidating appearance. And after Hagrid enters the hut, a bunch of things start happening. Hagrid starts explaining details that we already know, but Harry doesn't, and he's genuinely shocked that the Dursleys never told Harry any of this. How does Harry not know he's a wizard? How does he not know where Hogwarts is? How does he not know how Lily and James Potter died? And honestly, from my point of view as a reader, that is a little weird too. But I'm putting that on the idea that McGonagall and Dumbledore absolutely know Harry has no clue, while Hagrid probably does not. Why do I say that? Because in the previous chapter, we already realized McGonagall and Dumbledore are fully aware of Harry's position inside the house, too. They know he used to live in the cupboard under the stairs, and now he's been moved into the smallest bedroom in the house. So how are they not aware of how Harry is living? How are they not aware that he doesn't know any of this? So the conclusion I get is that they do know, but Hagrid probably doesn't. And honestly, that itself is strange, that Dumbledore sends Hagrid on a mission without giving him all the information. In parentheses, that kind of thing actually fits Dumbledore's character, because all across the story, we keep seeing Dumbledore send people on missions without fully explaining everything to them, or making the whole picture clear. It's almost like he looks for tools, and I don't know exactly why, but it really is one of his traits that he doesn't give people all the information, yet he still tells them to go do the job. And here, too, I think this is one of those moments where Hagrid is sent into a situation he doesn't fully understand, and he's genuinely shocked. Then he starts explaining that Lily and James didn't die in a car crash. They were killed by the darkest wizard of their era. But Hagrid makes a mistake here, too, and it's kind of weird that Hagrid doesn't know this. Hagrid says Voldemort came to kill Lily and James, and he sounds surprised that Voldemort didn't try to bring them over to his side first. But I don't think, my instinct really isn't that Voldemort was the kind of person who wanted to advertise for followers. Wizards who were dark by nature, or cowards, were drawn towards Voldemort on their own. It's not like he had to pitch himself to people. Maybe Grindelwald did stuff like that. But my impression is that Voldemort didn't need to pull people toward him. And that's what Hagrid says here, while we know later that Voldemort fundamentally came to kill Harry, and because Lily and James stood in his way, he had to kill them first and then go after Harry. In the middle of all this back and forth between Hagrid and Harry, we also learn Hagrid was actually expelled from school and became the keeper of keys at the school. But he doesn't spoil why he was expelled, and I won't spoil it either. We'll get there in Book 2 and open that up then. But one interesting point here is that when Hagrid was expelled, he was around 13 or 14. So yeah, a 13 or 14-year-old boy, and sure, Hagrid was physically huge, and 13 or 14 isn't a tiny child exactly, but still, he was a teenager. Could a teenager really become the keeper of keys at Hogwarts? The answer is no. Hagrid does not become the keeper of keys that year. Dumbledore, because he was convinced Hagrid was innocent, keeps him on, and he becomes the assistant to the keeper of keys. We understand that later. We don't have a perfectly clear number for how many years he stays an assistant before becoming the actual keeper of keys, but it was probably something like 10 years, and he seems to become the full keeper of keys around his mid-20s, around 24, which is also a role that suits Hagrid really well. Besides the fact that the keys to various parts of Hogwarts are in his care, the supervision of strange creatures around the edges of the forest would also fall to the keeper of keys. Right now, that's Hagrid. Before that, it would have been somebody else. And honestly, the role fits Hagrid perfectly. It fits his whole energy. And by the time of the story we're talking about now, Hagrid is basically a middle-aged man, around 60 years old. But another thing happens here too. We realize Hagrid is not actually allowed to make magic, and only temporarily Dumbledore has allowed him to use magic for this mission. Even then, he still asks Harry not to tell anybody he's making magic. And what is he using it for? That umbrella he carries. But the point here is that Hagrid's original wand was snapped when he was expelled. His wand was destroyed, split in half. But there's a theory, and honestly it feels more than random fan noise, that Dumbledore repaired the wand using the Elder Wand and hid it inside that umbrella, and Hagrid is really using the wand through the cover of the umbrella. And we see Hagrid light a fire with magic and start cooking sausages for Harry. But not long after that, he tries to turn Dudley into a pig, and all Dudley gets is a pig's tail. Now, up to this point in the chapters we've covered together, we've probably spent a lot of time putting the Dursleys under the microscope and dragging them for being terrible people. But usually when you go to court one-sided, you come back unhappy too. So let me try something different this time. Let me talk for a second like I'm the Dursleys' defense lawyer. Because I know you hate my clients, Vernon and Petunia, because they mistreated Harry, the character you love, and they were cruel to him and all of that. But let's still lay out the case. Vernon and Petunia brought a 1-year-old child into their house and raised him for 10 years, up to 11 years old, and they sent him to school. Even right here, when Harry says, "What do you mean you know nothing?" Harry actually looks a little uncomfortable, and I get the feeling he wants to be fair to his aunt and uncle, because he says, "No, they did send me to school. I know a lot of things. I know math, I know subtraction, and so on." Which tells you something interesting. Harry definitely doesn't love them, but I don't think Harry hates them either. Now think about what this child is from their perspective. Just for 1 second, move the camera angle. You haven't seen Hogwarts. You don't fully know Dumbledore. Petunia and Vernon had somebody close to them who was magical. Now let me tweak the wording a little and bring it into a modern everyday frame. Imagine your sister and her husband are involved in things you find eerie, occult, unsettling, maybe fortune-telling, curse-writing, ritual stuff. Honestly, you'd probably keep your distance. Even if you didn't fully cut them off, you wouldn't feel relaxed around them, because on some level they would scare you. Then they die because of the very thing you feared, and their child is forced into your home and is going to live with you. And that child probably wouldn't feel easy to love either. Guys, let's look at it a little more logically from their angle too. As innocent as baby Harry was, once he gets older, these strange inner traits start showing up, and for people like Vernon and Petunia, that's scary again. They give him oversized clothes. The clothes somehow fit. They cut his hair, it grows right back. And from their point of view, this kid is exactly what Rowling says about Lily too. Someone weird, in the most literal sense. And again, I want to say maybe we should give these two just a little more psychological room and not hate them in the most flat, simple way possible.
We move forward and Harry is still curious, and he asks Hagrid who killed my parents. And we know everybody avoids saying Voldemort's name out loud. Later, in Deathly Hallows, we learn there's a spell called the Taboo, where speaking Voldemort's name can expose your location, like your magical GPS lights up and people can track where the name was said. But I looked into it, and that only happens during the Second Wizarding War, not during the First Wizarding War when Voldemort first rose, and not now, when Voldemort doesn't yet have power again. So there is no magical consequence at this point to saying Voldemort's name. The fear here is cultural fear. Rowling is showing a society so scared that people can't even say the name out loud, even though at this point there is no magical penalty for doing it. And that's where we end our chapter. I'd love to hear your thoughts about all the different points I talked about in Chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This chapter got a little long too, and I think the next one might be even longer, because it's the longest chapter in the whole book, Diagonal Alley, and there is so much to talk about there. I hope I didn't wear you out. I'm waiting for your thoughts. Definitely join the group, definitely send this to your friends, leave a comment, leave a like so the video reaches more people and the circle of Potterheads keeps getting bigger. Good day or good night, and goodbye.